The rain fell gently over the alien jungle, washing the ashes of another failed day. Captain Ethan Hale sat beside a small fire, its light flickering against the towering blue leaves around him. His uniform was torn, his communicator broken, and hope had become something distant. He had been stranded on this strange world, Thriva, for over 3 months. No rescue signals, no friendly voice. Nothing but endless nights and the whisper of alien winds. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to speak to another living being, until he met her. She appeared one morning from the mist, small, fragile, and glowing faintly under the pale sun. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, and her eyes glowed golden, bright, and curious. At first, Ethan thought she was a hallucination. He had seen many strange things since the crash. But when the little alien girl tilted her head and smiled shyly, he realized she was real. She made strange musical sounds, her language flowing like song. Ethan couldn't understand a word. When he tried to talk back, she giggled, mimicking his tone like a playful bird. Slowly, over the next few days, she began to follow him. She watched him fix broken parts of his ship, helped him gather fruit, and even brought him shiny stones as gifts. Ethan had never seen kindness on this planet before. He didn't know what she wanted, but he could feel her trust. He started calling her Lyra, after an old constellation back on Earth. The name made her smile every time. One evening, while Ethan was cooking a strange root near the fire, she sat beside him, watching closely. She pointed to him and asked in her broken imitation of his words, "You, father?" The word hit him like a thunderbolt. He almost dropped the stick he was holding. "No," he said softly, shaking his head. "I'm not your father, Lyra." But the little girl only smiled wider and repeated it, pressing her small glowing hand against his chest. "Father." From that night on, she called him nothing else. At first, Ethan tried to correct her. Every time she would look at him with those big golden eyes, so full of innocence and trust, that he couldn't bring himself to argue anymore. He realized she had no one else. The jungle was dangerous, filled with creatures that hunted in packs, and she seemed to have been alone for a long time. So, he accepted it. Maybe he wasn't her real father, but he could protect her. Days turned into weeks. Ethan built a small shelter from metal scraps. Lyra helped by carrying branches, sometimes singing softly in her alien language. When she laughed, the whole forest seemed to glow brighter. Her laughter was a reminder that even in the darkest places, light could still exist. Ethan taught her simple English words: food, water, safe, friend. She learned quickly, copying his accent with adorable clumsiness. In return, she taught him how to find edible plants and how to sense when the storms were coming. They became a team, an unlikely pair of father and daughter, one human, one alien, surviving together on a world that wanted them both gone. Every night before sleeping, she would curl up near him and whisper, "Good, Father." And every time Ethan felt his heart twist with both warmth and pain. Somewhere deep down, he wished she really was his daughter. He didn't know who she truly was, where she came from, or why no one was looking for her. But he knew one thing: he would protect her with his life. And then one morning, the sky above Thriva burned. Massive silver ships descended through the clouds, their engines roaring like thunder. The jungle shook as beams of light cut through the mist. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her close as alien soldiers emerged from the tree line. At their center walked a tall, radiant figure wearing a crown of living light. Every creature bowed as she approached. Her golden eyes burned with power and grief. The moment she saw Lyra, her face changed. Shock, relief, and something deeper filled her gaze. Then she looked at Ethan, and her voice trembled. "Why?" the queen whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Does my daughter call you father?" Ethan stood frozen. The queen's words echoed through the jungle like thunder. Her soldiers surrounded him instantly, tall and armed with glowing spears. Their armor shimmered like liquid glass, and their faces showed anger mixed with confusion. But Ethan didn't move. He was too focused on the woman before him, the alien queen. She was magnificent. Her height was greater than any human's, her silver blue skin glowing softly in the morning light. A crown of living crystal rested on her head, and her golden eyes burned with power. Yet behind that royal strength, Ethan saw something else: pain. Lyra suddenly ran toward her, crying out a word in her native tongue. The queen's body trembled as she knelt down, gathering the little girl into her arms. Her expression broke. Her long fingers brushed through Lyra's silver hair as if confirming she was real. "My child," the Queen whispered, her voice shaking. "You are alive." The soldiers exchanged looks of surprise. Some bowed deeply. Ethan could hear them murmuring among themselves. Words like "the lost princess" and "the heir returns" floated through the air. Ethan took a step forward but stopped when several spears pointed at his chest. The Queen lifted her head slowly, her golden eyes locking onto him again. There was fire in them now. "Human," she said softly, though her tone carried power. "You will answer me truthfully." Ethan swallowed hard. "I will." She stood holding Lyra in her arms. The child clung to her neck but kept looking back at Ethan, fear and confusion in her eyes. The Queen's voice trembled, not with rage but with heartbreak. "Why does my daughter call you father?" Ethan wanted to speak, but words failed him. How could he explain the lonely nights, the laughter by the fire, the bond they had built? How could he make her understand that it wasn't something he had forced, it had simply happened? "I didn't teach her that," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "When I found her, she was alone, scared. She started calling me that on her own. I tried to stop her at first, but she wouldn't listen. I'm sorry if I disrespected your customs." The Queen studied him for a long, silent moment. Her expression softened slightly, though her eyes still glistened with unshed tears. "You cared for her?" Ethan nodded. "With everything I had. She saved my life too. I wouldn't have survived without her." Lyra tugged gently at her mother's sleeve and spoke in a mix of English and her own tongue. "Mother, don't hurt father. He's good. He made me safe." The Queen closed her eyes. Her composure cracked for a heartbeat. She held her daughter tighter, whispering something softly that Ethan couldn't understand. Then she looked back at him. "Come," she said finally. "You will come to my palace. You will explain everything." The guards hesitated, but the Queen's command left no room for argument. Two of them lowered their weapons, gesturing for Ethan to follow. Ethan didn't resist. He looked at Lyra, who reached out a hand toward him. The Queen allowed it. Their fingers touched briefly before she turned away, leading the way through the jungle. As they walked, Ethan's mind spun. A princess. A queen. He had been living with royalty without knowing it, and now he was walking into the heart of an alien empire, completely at their mercy. The Queen said nothing for a long time. But once they reached the landing platform where her ship waited, she spoke again, her voice low and trembling. "My people believed my daughter dead. I have mourned her for years, and now I find her alive, calling a stranger father. You cannot understand what that does to a mother's heart." Ethan looked at her, his voice steady. "I may not be from your world, Your Majesty, but I know what it means to love a child. I didn't steal her. I just loved her when she needed someone." For a moment, the Queen's mask of power slipped. Her eyes softened, almost human in their sadness. She turned away, her voice quiet as a sigh. Perhaps that is why she survived. The ship's doors closed behind them, and as they lifted into the sky, Ethan looked out at the shrinking jungle below. He didn't know what waited for him in the alien palace, punishment, or understanding, but one thing he knew for certain: he would not let Lyra face it alone. The royal ship flew, high above the shining jungles of Thriva. Through the glass walls, Ethan could see cities made of crystal towers and floating bridges glowing like starlight. It was the most beautiful sight he had ever seen, yet fear sat heavy in his chest. He didn't belong here. Beside him sat Lyra, holding his hand tightly. She smiled every time he looked her way, but her eyes showed worry. Across from them, the alien queen sat in silence, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She hadn't spoken since they left the jungle. When the ship landed, the gates of the palace opened with a deep hum. The palace was enormous, built from white stone and streams of golden light flowing through its walls. Strange music echoed softly through the halls. Every alien they passed stopped and bowed deeply to the Queen, but their eyes lingered on Ethan with confusion. And sometimes disgust. Ethan could feel their judgment. He was an outsider, a human among gods. Inside the main hall, tall crystal pillars reached to the ceiling, glowing with a soft heartbeat of energy. The Queen led the way, her steps silent. Lyra stayed close to Ethan, refusing to let go of his hand. When they finally reached a private chamber, the Queen turned to her guards. "Leave us." Her voice carried quiet authority. The guards bowed and disappeared, leaving only the three of them. For a long moment, the Queen just stared at Ethan. The silence between them felt heavy, like the weight of two worlds. "I have not thanked you," she said finally. Her voice was calm but carried deep emotion. "You protected what was most precious. To me, for that I owe you, more than I can say." Ethan shook his head. "You don't owe me anything, Your Majesty. Lyra kept me alive too. She gave me a reason to keep fighting." The Queen's eyes softened slightly. "You speak of her with love." "I do," Ethan said simply. "She's like a daughter to me." The Queen looked at her child, who now sat quietly between them, playing with Ethan's hand. "You know," she said slowly, "in our culture, when a child calls someone father, it is not a small thing. It means that the person has given part of their spirit to protect that child. It is sacred." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Then I'll honor it," he said. "Even if I'm human, even if I'm from another world, I'll never stop being there for her." For the first time, the Queen smiled faintly, a small, tired smile that held both gratitude and sorrow. "You speak like a warrior of the heart," she murmured. "But my council will not see it that way. To them, you are a trespasser who has touched royal blood." Ethan frowned. "Then let them hate me. I don't care. I didn't save her for their approval." The Queen studied him carefully, as if trying to see the truth inside him. "You are either very brave or very foolish human. Maybe both," Ethan said with a small smile. That answer made her chuckle softly, a sound that surprised even her. "You remind me of someone," she whispered. "Her father? My late mate. He spoke as you do, simple words, strong heart." Her tone changed, heavy with memories. "He died in the great storm trying to save Lyra. I thought they both perished that day." Ethan's heart ached. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't know?" The Queen nodded slowly. "No one did. Until now." She looked at him again, and her golden eyes seemed softer, more human. "You gave her back to me, yet she calls you father. It hurts, but I understand." Ethan looked down. "If it helps, I never tried to replace you. She just needed someone to love her when she was alone." For a long while, the Queen said nothing. Then she stood and walked toward the balcony. The city lights reflected in her crown like stars. "You have done something no human has ever done," she said. "You have touched the heart of a thriven queen, and of her child. That alone makes you dangerous to my people." Ethan sighed. "So what happens now?" She turned slowly, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "Now you must prove that your heart is as pure as you claim. My council will demand a test of courage and loyalty. If you pass, you may stay. If you fail, the stars will take you." Ethan met her gaze without fear. "Then tell them I'm ready." The Queen's expression softened again. "You humans," she whispered almost fondly, "never know when to be afraid." Lyra looked up at them both, confusion on her face. She didn't understand the danger ahead, but she sensed the tension. Ethan reached out, brushing her hair gently. "It's going to be all right, little one," he said softly. "I promise." But deep inside, he wondered if that promise was one he could truly keep. The morning sun rose over the shining towers of the alien city, its golden light reflecting off the palace walls. Inside, the halls buzzed with tension. Word had spread quickly. The Queen's lost daughter had returned, and she was calling a human her father. Ethan stood in the grand hall before the Queen's council. The alien lords sat in a half-circle, their robes glowing faintly with shifting colors. Their expressions were cold and unreadable. They whispered among themselves in their flowing language before one of them finally spoke. "This human," said the elder with eyes like molten silver, "has lived among beasts. He cannot be trusted with royal blood," another added sharply. "He defies our laws by letting the princess call him father. He must be judged." The Queen sat silently on her throne, her face calm but her eyes filled with inner conflict. She looked at Ethan, standing tall, unarmed, yet fearless, and something inside her softened. But she couldn't show it. "What do you propose?" she asked the council in a steady tone. The elder leaned forward. "Let him face the trial of the sacred storm. If his heart is pure and his courage true, the gods will spare him. If not, he will perish." Gasps filled the chamber. Even the Queen's expression flickered with shock. The trial of the sacred storm was no small thing. It was an ancient test meant for warriors of legend. Few had survived it. Ethan didn't fully understand their words, but he could sense the danger. Still, he stood firm. "If that's what it takes to prove I meant no harm to Lyra," he said, "I'll do it." Lyra, sitting beside her mother, jumped up. "No, he'll get hurt." Her voice cracked and tears welled in her golden eyes. Please, Mother, don't let them hurt him. The Queen closed her eyes briefly. Every word her daughter spoke tore at her heart. But she was the ruler of a world and her people were watching. She could not show weakness. She rose slowly from her throne, her voice strong yet filled with emotion. The test will begin at dusk, she declared. If the human survives, he will be honored. If he fails, he will meet his fate with dignity. Ethan looked at her, and though she did not speak to him directly, he could see sadness hiding behind her royal mask. He nodded slightly, accepting his fate. When the council was dismissed, the Queen turned away, but Lyra broke free from the guards and ran into Ethan's arms. He knelt down, holding her tightly. Father, don't go, she sobbed. You'll die. Ethan smiled gently, brushing away her tears. Hey, I've faced worse, remember? I'll come back. I promise. The Queen watched silently from the shadows of her throne. For a moment her royal mask cracked and a tear slipped down her cheek. No one saw it but her. As the sun fell, the arena outside the city came alive with thunder. Black clouds gathered above as lightning split the sky. The trial of the sacred storm had begun. Ethan stood alone at the center of the field, the wind roaring around him. The air shimmered with strange energy. He could feel the electric pulse of the planet itself. From the balcony high above, the Queen watched with her council. Lyra sat beside her, trembling, whispering prayers in her native tongue. The storm struck with fury. Bolts of light slammed into the ground, burning the soil. Ethan raised his arm to shield his face, his heart pounding. He had no weapon, no armor, just his will. Every time lightning struck near him, he felt the heat on his skin, the pull of raw energy trying to tear him apart. But he refused to fall. He thought of Lyra's smile, of the way she called him father. That word gave him strength beyond fear. At last, a final bolt of blinding light came down, hitting directly where he stood. The crowd gasped. For a moment, everything disappeared in a flash of white. When the light faded, Ethan was still standing, barely but alive. His clothes were burned, his body trembling, yet his eyes were steady. He raised his head toward the Queen's balcony. Their eyes met through the rain. The Queen's breath caught. In that moment, she knew. This man's courage was real. She whispered softly, more to herself than anyone else. Perhaps the gods have already chosen him. The storm quieted, and silence filled the arena. Ethan fell to one knee, exhausted but alive. From her throne, the Queen rose slowly. The trial is complete, she said in a voice that carried across the storm. The human has proved his heart. The people bowed their heads. Lyra ran down the steps, her small feet splashing through the puddles, and threw her arms around him, crying with joy. Ethan smiled weakly and whispered, Told you I'd come back. Rain still fell over the arena as the crowd slowly dispersed. The storm had passed, but its power lingered in the air. Ethan stood weakly, his body shaking with exhaustion. The skin on his arms was burned and his legs felt like lead, but he was alive. He had survived the trial of the sacred storm. Lyra ran to him, her small arms wrapping tightly around his waist. Her tears mixed with the rain as she cried, You did it, Father. You're safe. Ethan smiled weakly and brushed her glowing hair. I told you, little one, he whispered. I always keep my promises. From the royal balcony, the alien queen watched them silently. Around her, council members bowed their heads in respect, though some still wore uncertain expressions. None of them had expected the human to survive. None had expected him to stand unbroken against the wrath of the storm. The Queen's golden eyes softened. In that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. When Ethan finally collapsed, the Queen herself gave the order. Bring him to the healing chambers. He has earned rest. The healing chambers were carved from crystal, glowing softly with blue energy. Strange floating stones pulsed above Ethan's bed, releasing waves of warmth that soothed his pain. Alien healers moved around him quietly, their hands shining as they mended his burned skin. Lyra refused to leave his side. She held his hand tightly, her small fingers glowing faintly against his bruised ones. You're going to be okay, she whispered over and over as if her words alone could heal him. When the Queen entered, the healers bowed and stepped aside. The room grew silent. She approached slowly, her long robes brushing against the floor. Ethan opened his eyes weakly when he felt her presence. Your Majesty, he murmured, trying to sit up, but she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Do not move. she said softly. You have already proven your strength. Her voice, which once held cold command, now carried warmth. It almost sounded human. I didn't do it for them, Ethan said quietly. I did it for her. He nodded toward Lyra, who had fallen asleep beside him, clutching his arm. She believed in me. That's what kept me standing. The queen looked at her daughter, peaceful, safe, loved, and then at the man who had given her back everything she had. He lost. My people have many words for courage, she said, but none of them seem enough for what you did today. Ethan gave a faint smile. Sometimes courage isn't loud. It's just not giving up. The queen's eyes glistened with emotion she could no longer hide. You risked your life for a child who was not your own. Why? Ethan's answer was simple, but his voice trembled. Because she is mine. Not by blood, maybe, but by heart. That's enough for me. The queen turned away, trying to control her feelings. For years she had lived as a ruler, strong, untouchable, her heart locked away after the death of her mate and the loss of her daughter. But now this human had shown her something her world had forgotten, the pure, selfless love of a parent. As days passed, Ethan recovered slowly. The queen visited often, sometimes bringing strange fruits or just sitting quietly while he rested. Their conversations grew softer, easier. One evening, she asked, "On your world, do all humans love this way?" Ethan chuckled. Not all, but we try. We make mistakes, we fight, we fall, but love is what keeps us human. The queen smiled faintly. Perhaps that is why your kind never stop surviving. You love even when it hurts. He nodded. Yeah, and sometimes that's what saves us. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. The queen watched him, and something deep inside her heart began to change. The distance between alien and human was slowly fading, replaced by something new, respect, warmth, and maybe even affection. That night, as the twin moons rose over the glowing city, the queen stood alone on her balcony. She looked toward the healing wing where Ethan and Lyra slept peacefully side by side. The queen whispered softly to the wind, "Perhaps the gods sent him here for a reason." A single tear rolled down her cheek, glimmering like starlight. She wiped it away and turned her gaze to the horizon, where a quiet storm was brewing once more. Not of lightning this time, but of fate. Something was coming. Something that would test them all again. But now, the queen knew one thing with certainty. The human who her daughter called father was no ordinary man. The days that followed the storm were quiet, almost peaceful. Ethan's burns were healing, and he spent time teaching Lyra simple human songs which she sang softly while her golden eyes sparkled with curiosity. The queen watched from afar, often smiling when Ethan laughed with her daughter, though her expression was still tinged with worry. One evening, the palace trembled. The ground shook slightly beneath their feet, and the air hummed with an ominous energy. The guards ran past the halls shouting orders, their voices carrying alarm. Ethan and Lyra froze. "What is happening?" Lyra asked, her small hands clutching his arm. Ethan's eyes scanned the chamber. He could feel it too, the presence of something unnatural, dangerous, and deliberate. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. "Whatever it is, I won't let it touch you." The queen appeared beside them, her usually calm face pale. "The palace is under threat," she said, her voice tense. "A rogue faction from my council seeks to take Lyra and challenge the throne. They believe a human has no right to protect her. They will not stop until one of you falls." Ethan felt a chill, but he stood taller. "Then they will find that I fight for her no matter the cost." Lyra looked up at him wide-eyed. "Father, will you be okay?" Ethan smiled faintly, brushing her hair. "I'm okay as long as I have you by my side." The queen nodded, stepping forward. "I will lead the palace defenses, but the corridors are narrow. You will need to go through the shadow hall to reach Lyra if they attack her directly. It is dangerous. Very few have survived that place." Ethan's heart clenched. He had faced the trial of the sacred storm and he had survived, but this was different. This was not a test from the gods. It was a threat from beings who wanted to see him fail, to see Lyra taken. "I don't care how dangerous it is," he said firmly. "I will protect her." The shadow hall was dark and narrow, carved deep beneath the palace. Strange glowing symbols lined the walls, pulsing like warning lights. Ethan could feel the energy here. It was heavy, almost alive, and it tried to press him down as he walked. He held Lyra's small hand tightly. We have to stay quiet, he whispered. Don't let them see us until we reach the chamber. She nodded, trembling but trusting him completely. Every step was tense. Shadows moved in the corners, twisting unnaturally. Ethan had no weapon but his courage and his will to survive. Suddenly, figures emerged from the darkness. The rogue council members had sent soldiers, armored, armed, and relentless. Ethan stood in front of Lyra without hesitation. You'll have to go through me first, he said, his voice steady. The first bolt of energy hit him. Pain shot through his arm, but he pushed forward. Each strike from the enemy was stronger than the last, yet he refused to fall. He ducked, twisted, and used the narrow walls to his advantage, protecting Lyra every step of the way. Lyra's golden eyes glimmered in the darkness. She whispered softly, "Father, I believe in you." Those words gave him strength beyond reason. Every blow he took, every fall he endured, he rose again, determined. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for her, for the Queen, and for a bond that went beyond worlds. Finally, they reached the chamber where Lyra's safety could be secured. Ethan stood before the door, breathing heavily, his body battered but unbroken. The shadowy soldiers advanced, but something inside him surged, a fierce human defiance. "You will not take her," he roared. Outside, the Queen's voice thundered through the corridors. "Stop, you will harm no one." The rogue soldiers froze as her energy radiated through the palace, powerful and commanding. But Ethan didn't move away. He stood between Lyra and danger, a wall no force could break. For the first time, even the Queen allowed herself a moment to smile. She realized that her daughter's human protector had become something more than an ally. He had become family. Ethan looked at Lyra, and she smiled weakly through her tears. He nodded once. "I promised you, nothing will ever hurt you while I'm here." And in that moment he knew, no test, no storm, no shadow could ever break the bond between them. The palace was quiet now, the shadow of the rogue faction banished by the Queen's command. Ethan sat on the edge of a crystal balcony, his body aching, his mind still running with the events of the night. Lyra slept beside him, curled against his chest like a small glowing star. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to breathe. The Queen approached slowly, her steps soft against the glowing floor. She had watched him through the shadows, through storms, through trials, and she had seen something no one in her world had expected. A human who loved fiercely, fought bravely, and never wavered. "You stood between her and death," the Queen said quietly. Her golden eyes held a new warmth, a mixture of awe and gratitude. "You risked yourself without hesitation, without reward, without fear. That is something even my bravest warriors rarely do." Ethan looked at her, exhausted but steady. "She is my daughter, Your Majesty. I would do it again. I would do it 1,000 times if it meant keeping her safe." The Queen studied him, her mind weighing worlds, traditions, and emotions. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but resolute. "On Thriva, the bond between a parent and child is sacred. When a child calls someone father, it is a promise, a trust, and a declaration of love. You have earned that trust. You have proven your heart is true." Lyra stirred at that moment, her golden eyes fluttering open. "Mother?" she whispered, looking at the Queen. The Queen knelt to her daughter's level, brushing her silver hair away from her face. "Lyra, your father. He is worthy. He is the one who protected you when I could not." Lyra's small hand reached for Ethan's, and the Queen gave a small, approving nod. Ethan felt something swell in his chest, a warmth, a pride, and a joy that made the exhaustion fade. He began, his voice breaking slightly. "I never thought I'd hear those words from her. That she'd call me father, and I will honor that forever." The Queen stood, her robes glowing faintly in the soft light of the palace. "Then it is decided. You shall be recognized not as a guest, not as a warrior, but as the father of Lyra. You are part of this family, this world, and our history." Ethan blinked, overwhelmed. "Meet the part of your world?" "Yes," she said firmly. "You have shown more courage, love, and loyalty than any being in this kingdom. You are human, and yet you are worthy. You have bridged the worlds with your heart." Lyra giggled softly, climbing onto Ethan's lap. "See, Father? Mother says I'm right." Ethan laughed, his tired body shaking with relief. He lifted Lyra gently, holding her close. For a moment, the three of them stood together, a human, an alien queen, and her child, united by trust, courage, and love. The queen watched quietly from a short distance, a rare smile on her face. She realized that this human had done something extraordinary. He had taught her something she had almost forgotten. That love is stronger than blood, stronger than tradition, and stronger than fear. Ethan looked up at her. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" she asked, though her voice carried emotion. "For trusting me with her life. For letting me be her father," he replied. The queen nodded, her gaze soft but proud. "You have earned it, Ethan Hale. You are not only the protector of my daughter, you are a symbol of what humanity can be. Courage, love, and unyielding heart. That is why humans endure." Ethan smiled faintly, feeling the weight of her words sink in. He looked at Lyra, sleeping peacefully in his arms, and whispered, "We're home now, little one. Safe."